fat steer went to Chicago and sold for $3 a hundredweight. So fat steers were 1,000 pounds. That was $30. And that steer had been eating corn for straight 3 or 4 months. It showed in the feed. But anyhow, that's how low it was, and yet to the hospital. Otherwise, everything was done with midwives, in the house. We hope for the best. Stuff like that. And, this farm, he was, Dad was in his late 20s, I think, when I was born. And don't ask me how they landed on a section, 1 square mile, and it is choice. And the barn is on 1 quarter, and the house is on this quarter, and the granaries are on that quarter, and the hog house is on that quarter, so it never got split up. You have to be an idiot to try and split that up. You could, but it was laid out that way deliberately. And they worked, and they produced feed.
So that meant that the house had a 1/4 mile long driveway to get to the half a mile long driveway.
Half a mile long to get to the house.
So it was a half mile driveway from the county road to get to the house.
Yeah, that was about it.
Oh, especially in the wintertime, you have half a mile of snowdrifts.
But it was nice for all the yard work.
Right
there, all of that. The last real memory I have of that place was sale day. They had an auction when we moved to Pennsylvania, and there was neighbors there shoveling out the snowdrift to get up the driveway. And they, in my mind, the snow was that. They had some bad winters and stuff like that. And at last, Dad just gave up. He was close to a nervous breakdown. And I told people, if he had stayed there a couple more years, I would have been multi-millionaire, and he would have been dead and buried 30 years ago. But that's a different story. And anyhow, that's where I lived the first 5 years. And I heard the word from Angie a few weeks ago describing various children and stuff, and I guess I was docile because I heard Mom say once, if you had a problem, you just sat down on the floor and bawled. So that's the way that was.
Oh, that's docile.
Yeah, I know. But then Dad had friends in Pennsylvania, boyfriends, of those decades before, and they said, you know what, John, if you have winters like that there, because my dad did not like cold weather, he was not built for cold weather, why don't you come here to Pennsylvania? And we moved. Mom and I and Cornelia, Bertha as a little baby, we got put on a train, which I don't remember, and we took the train from Rock Rapids to, I think, Philadelphia. And then Dad loaded up a big orange truck with whatever stuff he could, household or some machinery or stuff, and came out there, and we lived on an 80-acre farm, which I remember very well because I had my first 4 years of grade school there. And among other things.
So, wait a minute. So you went by train to the east, and then Grandpa drove a truckload of house goods and farm. Did he take farm machinery along back with him?
Not much.
Well, was that when did he go back then to get a second load?
I don't know. Some of that is gone from,
Well, because I remember him talking about that he had a couple hired men or maybe that was when you moved from Pennsylvania back to Iowa, that he had some hired men go with him in the truck.
Yeah, there was something in there. I don't know whether that was going or coming. I can't recall.
Because the funny part of that is that these guys who were helping him
Yeah,
move,
yeah,
they had never been out of the state of Pennsylvania. They had,
that's right.
they'd never probably even been to the western end of Pennsylvania.
No, that's right.
So they took a whole. Grandpa said they had a big. Each of them had a package or a wad of postcards, and they would write postcards as they were going down the road, and then they get to town, they'd mail off their postcards. And it was the wintertime when they were doing this too.
Yeah, see, I never got that story. That went on down to the next generation.
So, and the winter story that was so funny was that these guys, having been from Pennsylvania, couldn't comprehend how cold it was in the Midwest. And so when they got out to the Midwest and they found, the stock cattle out in the fields with the snowdrifts around their legs,
Yeah.
they asked Grandpa, well, aren't they just going to fall over and die now because it was winter? They didn't realize that farm animals could actually live in that kind of country.
Yeah. Okay, those were shockers for those people. For my part, as a little kid, I really enjoyed Pennsylvania. We lived in a 2-story red brick home, 4 white columns, and a black slate roof, just like you see on some of the big calendars we used to get. I went to a little red brick country schoolhouse, maybe a quarter of a mile up the road, 1 teacher, maybe 20 kids, and the kids were nice. We lived with people we call Pennsylvania Dutch, that's German, and others, and the kids were nice, polite, not mean, and stuff like that. And I'll get to more later on. But then farming was, the corn was cut and put in a bundle and shocked, and then it was brought in by wagon and cut into silage, put in a silo, and then that was for cow feed because the mom and dad milked some cows. Grain was wheat. Yeah, pretty sure it was wheat. It was cut with a binder into bundles, shocked, just like you did in Iowa, stuff like that. And then later on, the thrash machine was set up right by the barn, and the straw was blown into the barn because barns there were 2-story. You had a ramp up to the 2nd floor. They do that in Wisconsin too, but I remember that ramp going to the 2nd floor, and the straw was blown into the barn. Okay, that's no big deal. They went with team and wagon to the fields to get these bundles, and those were Conestoga wagons, about this wide on the bottom, and then the sides flare out, and that's just like the prairie schooners that you saw later on with the white hood, the people going down the Oregon Trail, stuff like that. Well, the guy was 2 men, and at first they just pitched them bundles in the wagon. Then 1 man went in the wagon, and the other guy would pitch him in, and every bundle from then on was placed, just like laying brick. And there was a long pole in each corner, and I'll bet you that pole was that high, stuck out of the corners, and it was flared a little bit. And this man on the ground would put bundles up, and with a pitchfork you can put a bundle up there. That's no problem. When that was too high, he put that fork away, and he got one with a long handle. And they kept stacking them up there, and to a kid, it was not too far from those lights up there on that fan. It was awful. I wouldn't have dared right up there. And that's the wagon load of wheat bundles they brought into the trash machine. And to a kid, that was something to see. And those guys were smooth, quiet farmers, Pennsylvania Dutch. They know how to take care of the land. Half of them were Mennonites. You know that. And it was, to a kid, it was really fun. Winters, the most